Hello. My daughter Linda and I are very pleased that you're with us. God bless you. We're in the book of Acts. We're now going to begin chapter 7, verse 9. Stephen is the speaker. He's surveying Israelite history. His intention has several faces, but his intention is to show that Israelite history, the history of Israel up until his day, has been a history moving toward fulfillment. And he shows how Abraham comes out of Ur, he goes into Haran, comes out of Haran, goes into Canaan. His children go out of Canaan into the wilderness, out of the wilderness into Canaan itself, and that kind of thing. And then the Mosaic Law coming into being. We got through verse 8. So we got from Abraham to Jacob and the 12 patriarchs. One of the children we're beginning with now. Now he moves from Jacob to Joseph. And in verse 9, the patriarchs, becoming envious, sold Joseph into Egypt. But God was with him. See, there are all these lovely, rich questions that arise. Why should there have been any prison or being sold into Egypt at all? God allows people to exercise free will, even when it's wickedness that is their motive. He allows it. He says that in Acts 14, 16 and 17, a text that needs read repeatedly so that we will get it. God gives people up to things. Not that he washes his hands completely, that's not the point. He allows them to do these things. That was Romans 1, verse 23, and Acts 14, 15 to 17. Here, it was envy in the patriarchs. You remember the story, and I won't repeat it. It's about him dreaming, and his father has him as a special child. You get the story in the book of Genesis. You're well acquainted with it, so we don't need to be telling it over again. And maybe part of the reason Stephen doesn't tell it all over again is because they're well acquainted with it. And the point he wants to get is that Joseph is the point at which God is taking care of things ahead of time. God was with him in Egypt. When God doesn't seem to be there, he's there. But God is with him in Egypt and in prison. And, verse 10, delivered him out of all of his troubles, gave him favor and wisdom in the presence of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Notice, this is all the work of God. It's always God who's doing it. Is it good? Does it move the promises along in goodness? Yes. Then it is God's act of doing. Does the evil event, the envy of the brothers selling the boy, does it, the evil, move along God's purpose? Absolutely. But their motivation is envy. He allows it. God allows them to be envious. But he uses their free choice to be envious, to lay the groundwork that carries forward his purpose. Now he is governor over Egypt, and all of that, the text we just read said that was the work of God. 11. Now famine and great trouble came over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and our fathers found no sustenance. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first. And the second time Joseph was made known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to the Pharaoh. Then Joseph called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. So Jacob went down to Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers. And they were carried back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham bought for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. Abraham, the only piece of the property that Abraham actually historically stood in and said, "This is mine," is the burial plot that he bought from a Hittite. Okay. So what have we got? We've got God using the envy, the evil of the brothers, to put someone in Egypt to lay the groundwork that will enable Israel to grow and develop. From 75 to, it doesn't say in Exodus chapter 1, but it says a multitude of them. So, you remember the story. By and by, the children of Israel come down into the land. Joseph reveals himself. Pharaoh blesses the entire family, number there, gives them land in Goshen, a very prosperous part of the delta of the River Nile. And there they prospered. Okay? God is already at work putting Jacob in Egypt and so forth. And into the bargain, while Joseph is in Egypt and becomes the savior, not only of his own family, as it turns out, but to Egypt and the nations around. All of that is in Genesis. And the word blessed recurs, it repeatedly occurs. And that is part of the fulfillment of God saying to Abraham in chapter 12, "Those who bless you, I bless. Those who curse you, who get in the way, that is, in mistreating you, who get in the way of me fulfilling my purpose, I will curse them. I'll deal with them." And that's the plagues in Egypt and all of that. Now, we're in the book of Acts chapter 7, and we're now down in verse 17. Oh, one more thing. At the end of the book of Genesis, Joseph, who in his day could have gotten a big palace, maybe got a pyramid or something like that, if he had stayed in Egypt, he didn't want to. He said, "When I die, take my bones up and bury them in Canaan." Why did he do that? Because he believed the promises of God, and he believed that God was going to give them the land, and he wanted to be there. Sort of like when Israel came marching out of the wilderness and into the promised land. You can imagine Joseph rising up out of the tomb, and Abraham rising up out of the tomb, and all of the fathers rising up out of the tomb, and all standing there, and the nation marching by in a celebration. Now the land is given to them. Verse 17 of Acts 7. When the time of the promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, that's in Genesis 15, where God develops his promise and tells him all about going into Egypt. When the time of the promise drew near, when God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. Now they're in Egypt. They might have stayed there, settled there. But the new Pharaoh, whichever one that was, he knew nothing about Joseph, cared about nothing that related to Joseph. And he's now afraid of Israel joining the enemies against him, you see. So that is all happening. And it was then there God was using the ugly Pharaoh to bring about his promises. So he's going to drive them out. They may have wanted to stay there. When they get into the wilderness, you remember when they were in the wilderness, repeatedly they complained about the lack of food and all that. Well, at least we had cucumbers down there in Egypt, that kind of thing. With the 40 years in the wilderness, you remember? But over there in Goshen, prospering, they might well have stayed there. God moves them out through a Pharaoh who uses his own will and the sets of circumstances of history and war and that kind of thing. Well, at that time, Moses is born. And in 17, time of the promise drew near. God had sworn to Abraham. The people grew and multiplied in Egypt, till another king arose who did not know Joseph. This man dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our forefathers, making them expose their babies so that they might not live. One or all the boys dead. See, there's the killing of the children. Ooh, all these echoes, don't you see? 20. At this time Moses was born, was well-pleasing to God. He was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. Father's name was Amram, but he's not talked about. His mother, Yochebed, or some say Jochebed. She is the one that's talked about. I want you to notice that. It was a woman that was the deliverer of Moses. Okay, at this time, verse 20, Moses was born and was well-pleasing to God. He was brought up in the house of his father's house for 3 months. But when he was set out, he was going to be killed. You know the story about how his mother did what she did. But when he was set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own. And this is interesting and important. 22. Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. Apparently, any kind of ruckus, he was a part of the Egyptians, and a war going on there, though it's not at all spelled out, so we're speculating, aren't we? 23. Now, when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended and avenged him who was oppressed and struck down the Egyptian. For he supposed, important, 25 is important, for he supposed that his brethren, it's all important, 25 is important for our point here. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand, but they didn't understand. But Moses thought himself, not only did he think, I am to be the deliverer, and we can guess how he got that. He knew who he was. His mother took care of him after, you know the whole story. She taught him and all of that kind of stuff. He knew that these were his people. And because he was a big hitter in the Egyptian structure, he took it that I am the Messiah for them. And that was true. But he had the impression that it would be done in a certain way and at a certain time. And he goes to visit them. He sees one oppressing the other, an Egyptian oppressing one of his people. He killed the Egyptian. He supposed that his brother would know. And then 26, the next day he appeared to two of them, that's two Israelites, and they were fighting. And he tried to reconcile them, saying, men, you are brethren. Why do you wrong one another? But he who did his neighbor wrong pushed him away, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday? Then at this saying Moses fled and became a dweller in the land of Midian, where he had 2 sons. That's verse 29. This is important. Moses, who is now Israel's in Stephen's day, Moses is the man. Yes, but Moses had an experience where he came to his own people and came to his own people to redeem them, offering himself, wanting to be the Redeemer, the Messiah. And they wouldn't have him. And they wouldn't have him. Well, we wouldn't reject the Messiah. Yes, you would. You did it. You did it with Moses. And you not only did it on that occasion, which led to Moses going 40 years in Midian. You did it in the wilderness repeatedly. And you said things like, let's build as a god, because what has happened to this Moses, and that's what they called him, it's in the text, read the book of Exodus. We don't know what has happened to this Moses. He was 40 days up the mountain, all of that kind of thing, you see. And they always dispute his right to lead and his right to be the deliverer. You see that throughout the book of Exodus. You see it in the book of Numbers, and you see it in the book of Deuteronomy. In fact, the truth is that all the major leaders that God had chosen out, whether it was David or Moses or Samuel, they were all rejected by the people. So that when Jesus is rejected, it is really no surprise. I wish we had the time to work along with this. When Jesus lived his life here among his people and all of that, he wasn't saying, now, there's a prediction involved in that text. It doesn't. I'm not denying that there's prediction in the Old Testament. I'm not denying that. I'm saying it's not just a prediction here and there. Jesus says, look at Israel's history. Look at it. Anyone who becomes a part of Israel ends up getting it in the neck. Was there a Samuel? You rejected him. Was there a David? You rejected him. Was there a Moses? You rejected him. And on. And others, prophets, by the truckload. You rejected them. It's no surprise that what's happening to me is happening to me. Get in the way of Israel nationally. I need to say that again and again when I mention this, because there were there were thousands of people who remained faithful down the centuries to God. But the mass of Israel, the bulk of them that made it, this is a national movement, was unfaithfulness. The rejection of godly men and women who influenced the nation. They wouldn't have it. And that's what's happening here, Stephen says, when you reject Jesus. You think it's startling that you reject? It's ugly and faithless to God for you to reject Jesus. But do you think it's startling? There's nothing new about it. This is your history. Okay. So Moses is rejected. He runs off. He's in Midian now for 40 years, and he has 2 children. And where am I? I'm down in 30, verse 30. And when 40 years had passed, an angel of the Lord, note that, okay? It's an angel of the Lord. That's mentioned also in Exodus 3. We won't develop this, but you need to hear me say this, okay? Well, you probably already know it, but just in case. 40 years, and an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush. An angel of the Lord is a messenger of the Lord. It does seem, though it's not absolutely clear, it does seem that there was a particular messenger of God, an angel of the Lord, an exalted one. You know how the scriptures speak about angels and archangels. Within this heavenly structure, messengers and all of that of God, there were levels of authority and commission. Okay? The angel of the Lord is a phrase that occurs again and again in the Old Testament. And it appears that it's the same angel all the time, though it can be argued, no, it was a different angel, but on this occasion he was the angel who was carrying the message. One way or another, the angel of the Lord is not Jesus in the pre-incarnate state. There's no justification for that kind of speech. Did that sound rude? I don't mean it to sound rude. I just mean to say that doesn't work. We're in Acts chapter 7. The angel of the Lord appears to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. Did I tell you that Linda has me up on Facebook? Would you like, I don't know what you need to do to get a look in, but there are a number of little segments already up there, 3 to 4 minutes long. And if she befriended you or somebody else shared them, or I don't know how it works, but you could work it out. I have one up that talks about the burning bush. We won't spend any time here. Look it up on Facebook. And then I'm supposed to say this. When you look it up, share it. Okay? I've done what I've been told, okay? I'm in a good mood right now, am I not? Do I not seem in a good mood? I'm doing okay. I'm in chapter 7 and verse 31. Moses saw it. He marveled at the sight, and he drew near to observe the voice of the Lord. Near to observe. The voice of the Lord came to him. Notice what happened there. It changed from an angel of the Lord, and now it's the voice of the Lord. And the voice of the Lord says, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He's not a new God. He's telling Moses who he is. I'm the God related to the promises. I'm the God who made the covenant with your fathers. I'm the God who made promises about Canaan. All of that would have been well known to Moses. But note that Moses ran to Midian. And look, he's not happy with God. He thought, well, I'm the Messiah, and, you know, God should have seen and all of that, and he didn't. So his firstborn son, he didn't even circumcise him. And he called him by a name that means pretty much a stranger, a foreigner, away from home, a homeless one. He's upset. He's not very pleased with God, but he's afraid of God. God says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses trembled and dared not look. Ooh. Why was he trembling? Because it was God who's speaking. Now, when I say it's God who's speaking, remember, it's an angel who's speaking as and for God. Stephen will make that point again. So, God in the angel speaks, and the Lord says in 33, take your sandals off your feet, the place where you stand is holy ground. I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I've heard their groaning and have come down to deliver them. I have come down to deliver them. I have come down. You know that spatial speech? You do know. It's got nothing to do with spatial speech. God isn't up there and space travels down. It's the way of saying, I see it and I'm going to do something about it. He makes himself present in the doing of it. He doesn't need the space travel. I will come down. Yeah, you remember how in Genesis 11 he says, I'm going to go down and check on those fellows and see what they're up to. And I'm going to go down and see if things are as bad as the report is. All of that is to make the point. It's the biblical way and the prophetic way of saying that God was intimately and profoundly concerned about these things. And how did he spell that out? Well, God made a special trip. As if he didn't know where he was from, you see. Let the Bible talk its own way. Don't worry about the Bible. Don't worry about all these. Well, how can that be? Just the way you would say it. These are humans. God, by the Spirit of God, superintends the production of what we have as the Bible, but it's through humans he does all of that. And he lets humans use human speech. They tell the truth in various ways that they speak. And so God says, I'm coming down to deliver them. And the next phrase is what? The next phrase in 734 is, and now come, I will send you to Egypt. Hey, how about that? God says, I'm going to come down and deliver Israel. Now then, go set them free. Isn't that an interesting approach? Well, Moses in 35, this Moses, whom they rejected. Bear that in mind. Stephen is convicting his hearers. You rejected Moses? Is there any surprise then that you reject Jesus? Then Moses, whom they rejected, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge? No matter what the people thought, God commissioned Moses. And if God commissions Moses, that's the end of the argument. Yes? We need to bear that in mind. The will of God is the will of God. whether we like it or not. If it's clearly the will of God, it doesn't matter what we think or what we like. This one whom they rejected, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge, is the one God sent to be a ruler and a deliverer. You can hear him saying Jesus, can't you? You can hear him say, the one that they rejected, whom God was making a deliverer out of, and they wouldn't have it. Ooh, yeah, I mean, their eyes are rolling. Oh, good grief, they don't know how to handle all that. The parallel is stunning. And he sent him to be a deliverer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. Get that? Nobody ever saw God. Nobody ever saw God. It doesn't matter what the text says in one place or another place. Nobody ever saw God. Jesus said that. John said it in John chapter 1, and Jesus said it in throughout the book of John in 2 ways he said it. But moving on from here, my time is nearly up. So he brought them out after he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness for 40 years. Now he's gotten from Abraham all the way through the wilderness and the closing of the wilderness 40-year journey. Yes? And that's where we're going to have to stop for now. And we'll take it up at that. I'm glancing before I allow Linda, who's ready to pounce on the stop button. Okay, that's a good breaking point. Thanks for being with us. We hope you're being blessed. We do. We hope you're being blessed by this. God help all of us to serve him and please him. Thank you.